stupid man thing!
Hi there, Presley here. A Resident Evil 9 announcement is imminent. Resident Evil 9 is rumoured to be the last numbered title in the series. Chris, Jill, Leon and Claire are expected to return to wrap up their stories. Rumours say that the game won't be released till at least 2024 or 2025. Until then, let's look at what to expect from Resident Evil 9. Before we get started, I would just like to say, if you've been enjoying my videos, please like, share, subscribe, but most importantly, enjoy. Without further ado, let's get started. Let's look at some gameplay elements that should be included in Resident Evil 9. Firstly, Resident Evil 9 should reintroduce the item boxes. This classic Resident Evil feature was not present in Resident Evil 8. Even though the player was able to upgrade their inventory space, the item boxes were sorely missed. One reason for this was there was a huge array of guns at the player's disposal. If the player wanted to use a range of different guns, they had limited inventory space to do so. Reintroducing the item box is a small quality of life convenience that would increase players' enjoyment. Another gameplay element that should be included is an extended vehicle section. Resident Evil 8 had an incredibly fun vehicle section preceding and including the Heisenberg boss fight. This was a very welcome addition to the series and should be included again in Resident Evil 9. An action-packed vehicle section in the middle of the game would be a great change of pace. There's nothing quite as satisfying as getting in an overpowered vehicle and mowing down dozens of zombies. Additionally, these types of action segments are refreshing in a horror game. Speaking of action, the game should also include an action climax, like Chris's section in Resident Evil 8. Once again, this is an excellent way to change the pace. It is also hugely rewarding after playing most of the game as the underdog to get the overpowered weapons towards the end of the game to tear through zombies. Also, it's just good old fun. A gameplay feature that shouldn't be included in Resident Evil 9 is a partner system. Historically, partner systems haven't worked well in the Resident Evil series. After the success of Resident Evil 7 and 8, Resident Evil 9 should continue to be a solo horror experience. Leaks claim that Resident Evil 9 will have a trust system. Whether these leaks are true or not remains to be seen, however the idea itself has potential. In one of the closing scenes of Resident Evil 8, Chris discovered that one of his teammates from the BSAA was in fact a bioweapon. This is where the trust system could come into play. If the player is working with a team of NPCs, any one of these team members could be a bioweapon under the mask, and thus a threat to the player. A trust system would help the player identify who would have their back and who would stab them in the back. On that note, I have a discussion topic for you. Do you think Hunk is a bioweapon under the mask? Leave your thoughts in the comments section. The same leaked document also claims that the game will have a ghost town setting. This setting is described to be inspired by old westerns. This is certainly a new and unique direction for the series and could be incredibly atmospheric. Another unique setting for Resident Evil 9 could be a jungle setting. If executed correctly, this could be horror gold. Imagine being hunted by infected jungle predators. This could be similar to the zoo level in Resident Evil Outbreak. Another more classic horror setting could be an Egyptian setting. Resident Evil 8 also had a classic horror setting, which was the Eastern European Gothic castle. It wouldn't be a huge stretch to imagine at least a small section set in the narrow side streets of Cairo, or even the cursed tombs in the middle of the desert. Either way, Resident Evil 9's setting should be somewhere where the series has not been before. On the note of classic horror, let's look at what types of enemies could be included in Resident Evil 9. Resident Evil 8's villains were also based on classic horror. For example, the Lycan enemies were werewolves, and Lady Dimitrescu and her daughters were pretty much vampires, and also those ghoul things that you find in the dungeons. To continue this trend, Resident Evil 9 should also include enemies based on monsters from folklore. For example, if the game chose the Egyptian setting, there could be mummified bioweapons based on cursed mummies. With how well received the enemies were in Resident Evil 8, mummies wouldn't feel out of place. Resident Evil 9 should go all out and explore monsters from classic horror. One type of enemy that would be really great would be one that's based on the Headless Horseman. Once again, imagine being hunted through the dark woods by an enemy on horseback. This of course would work excellent as a stalker type boss, like the Nemesis in Resident Evil 3 Remake or Mr. X in Resident Evil 2 Remake. Another great villain would be one based on Dorian Gray. For those of you who don't know, Dorian Gray is a man cursed with immortality. Physically, he stays young and perfect forever, but he has a hidden image which bears all his burdens of old age. This would make an excellent puzzle boss, similar to the Benevito house in Resident Evil 8. Imagine being hunted through a house by an immortal Dorian Gray type villain. The only way to defeat him and escape would be to solve all the puzzles to unlock the attic and discover his portrait. At that point, the player could destroy the portrait, defeat the boss, and escape the house. Yet another enemy that could be based on a classic horror icon could be one based on Frankenstein's monster. Imagine a powerful bioweapon created using the reanimated parts of previous bosses. This could include parts from bosses such as the Nemesis and Mr. X. It could also include parts from other enemies such as a licker's tongue. Any of the aforementioned monsters would make formidable enemies in Resident Evil 9. Story-wise, Resident Evil 9 needs to naturally follow on from where Resident Evil 8 left off. Chris discovered that one of his team members from the BSAA was in fact a bioweapon. Thus, he vowed to make someone pay. A Resident Evil 8 post-credit scene also revealed a grown-up Rose being given a mission. Hopefully this story is drawn to a conclusion in the Shadows of Rose DLC. This way, if Resident Evil 9 is in fact the final numbered entry in the series, it could focus on wrapping up all of the old characters' stories. Taking this into account, Chris is likely to be one of the playable characters in Resident Evil 9. It must be uncovered why the BSAA sent a bioweapon on the mission with Chris. Before I move on to the next point, I would just like to say if you're enjoying this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing to Prez1990 for more gaming videos. The most divisive feature of Resident Evil 9 would be whether the game should be first person or third person. On one hand, Resident Evil 7 and 8 were both excellent first person games. The first person view makes it more immersive for the player. It also adds a whole other element of horror as the player has a limited field of view. On the other hand, Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes were excellent third person horror games. These felt more like classic Resident Evil. So which route should Resident Evil 9 go? Well, the good news is that might be up to the player to decide. The Resident Evil 8 DLC introduces a feature where you can play the whole Resident Evil 8 game in third-person view. Taking this into consideration, it is extremely likely that the player would have an option to choose whether they wish to play Resident Evil 9 in first-person or third-person modes. This is of course the most sensible option for Capcom to choose. That way, fans of the Resident Evil 7 and 8 gameplay could choose to play the game in first person, and fans of the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes gameplay could choose to play in third person. Which would you prefer? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And there you have it, what Resident Evil 9 could be like. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and consider subscribing to Prez1990 for more gaming videos. All that's left for me to say is take care, and I'll see you in the next video.